The LED light in the 3D printed handbag is one of its most popular features. It looks really complicated, but it's actually quite simple to wire up this light. I will show you exactly how to do it. So the things you need is what you see on the screen here. So first off, you need the 3D printed battery holder, and you print it with that surface and that surface towards the bed. So the top and the bottom. That's how you 3D print it. Then you need battery cells. It's designed for the CR2016 battery cells. You can find these in most computer stores, hardware stores, auto parts store, or even a well-equipped grocery store will have these. You should shop around. Sometimes they're really expensive and sometimes they are quite affordable. You need 2 M3 screws, or alternatively, if you're in the Imperial system, a 540 or a 632 should also fit. They need to be 6 millimeters long or 1/4 of an inch. You need an LED strip that's suitable for 5 to 6 volts, and it can be maximum 8 millimeters wide. You can find this in an electronics store, computer store, as well as online. And if it's designed to be powered with a USB plug, then it's the perfect thing. And you can see this one can be cut to length, and that's what you want. Then you need some foam mounting tape to hold it into your bag. And then, one of the most important things, you need some little pieces of wire, altogether about 100 millimeters of thin electrical wire. It can be the same color. I just used 2 colors for visibility to make this clear where things go. You need a few tools. You need a soldering iron and some solder. You need wire strippers, you need scissors, you need a suitable screwdriver, and you need safety glasses. And you should wear these all the time when you are soldering or working with little things, trimming 3D prints and so on, because pieces can come flying and you don't want to get that in your eye. So this is all the stuff you need. So let's get started. To protect my nice white table, I like to use one of these silicone mats. It's absolutely not necessary, but if you have a desk that you care about, or if you use the kitchen table at home and it's not popular if you get marks on it, a silicone mat is a great thing to have, but not at all necessary. So first on, put on your safety glasses and keep them on. Then let's cut some wires. So I picked 2 different colors. If you can't find suitably thin wire, there is one trick. Sometimes, quite often actually, wires for electrical stuff or electronical stuff has many wires inside. So these little wires actually came out of this thick wire. So I cut the piece out of this. And look what's inside. There are actually thin wires inside here. So that could be one way of finding thin wires if you can't find them somewhere else. So inside here, they're perfect little thin wires. So let's cut our wires to length and strip them. If you print this instruction, which you can download from scienceenvy.com, on A4 paper, these will actually be to scale. So what we can do, we can take our wires and we can just put them on here, mark it with a permanent marker exactly where we need to cut and strip them. So there's the red wire, and then let's do the white wire. Keep it there so we remember what we need to do. So let's trim this to length. White one, red one. Then we need to strip off the insulation to expose the copper. This is a little bit tricky. Can take some practice, but we're gonna get all of this insulation off, but we can't do that in one shot. So I will do it in a couple of shots. So first I cut just through the insulation, not through the whole wire, and then I go up one size and then I pull it off. And see, there's the copper exposed. So let's do that again until we get the amount of wire exposed that we want. I'll do 2 more takes through the insulation and then pull it off. And then one more take. This is actually the hardest part of this whole job, is to strip off the insulation. So that's a long end, and then we need the short end as well. And there it is, the short one, the long one. The exact length is not super critical, but you want it to be approximate, because then everything will assemble nicely. So let's do the same thing with the other wire. You have to be careful so you don't cut through the copper strands. If you cut maybe one single strand, that will be okay. But if you cut multiple of them, you have to start over. You have to take a new piece of wire and do it again, because we don't want to lose that much wire. Okay, there it is. Here are our wires, and this was actually the most difficult part of this whole job, was to prepare these wires. And if we compare it, we can see here, this is exactly as it is on the instructions. So our next job will be to cut our LED strip to length. And you need to note that you can only cut in certain places. Where you see these copper terminals, that's where you can cut it. Don't cut it in between, then you will break it. It won't work. So how long your strip needs to be depends on how big your handbag is. Mine is kind of a medium sized. And I'm just going to lay it down here and measure out. And it goes into the holder a little bit. You can see that's the edge of the holder. So I won't want to cut it that long. You can cut this with scissors, or you can cut this with a diagonal cutter. So that's our piece we will use. And of course, when you cut this, the other end should not be plugged in, because then you will short circuit it and you can break it. Okay, the next step is somewhat important. If you go back to the instructions, it says orientate the strip in this direction. What does that mean? Well, if you look really carefully, you can see there's a tiny little plus and a tiny little minus there. So we want to orient it exactly like that. So not that way where it's minus and plus, but this way where we have plus and minus. Then we want to peel back this rubber cover, that's this protective cover that it has. I typically just do it with my fingernail. Peeling it back so we expose these terminals, and then I will cut it off with just cutters like that. Now our terminals are exposed so we can solder to them. Okay, next step is to solder the wires onto these terminals. The first thing we have to do is to turn on the soldering iron and to heat it up. So our soldering iron is now hot. And if you have a good soldering station like I have, it comes with this pad. You wet that and you use that to clean off the tip of the soldering iron. If you don't have this, you can just fold up some kitchen tissue and wet it and use that to clean your tip. So as soon as it heats up, I'm going to clean it and then put a new tin or solder onto it. And of course, when you solder, you want good ventilation because a little bit of smoke comes off. So we want to solder our wires onto these terminals. And a few little tricks is that I need to hold this in place. I can use the soldering station to do so. And then what I want to do first, I want to actually put solder onto these terminals. Clean off the tip, put brand new solder on it because it oxidizes really quickly. And then I want to put a little bit of blob on solder onto each terminal. Should be pretty quick when you solder. You don't want to take more than a couple of seconds, because if you heat it too much you can damage the LED strip. And then we will do the same thing for these wire tips. Solder stuck to it. Burn it off. So there's one. And here is the, just get the other one. Just a little bit of solder. And our next thing will be now to solder these on to the terminal. So we have to look at the instructions, and we actually may want to take a look and see how this is going to go together. So in the holder, this shorter wire will go at the bottom through this hole here. That would mean we want it to connect to this terminal, to the plus terminal here. So you can hold the wire with pliers, or you can hold it with your fingers. If you're quick, it will not get too hot. If it gets hot, then if it hurts, just let go and do it again. So let's solder this on to the positive terminal. So because we have already put solder on both parts, I just need to touch it and it melts together, and then just hold it still until it has solidified, which also just takes a second or two. So let's do the same thing. And I like to always clean the tip in between, clean it off on the pad, put new solder on it, helps to transfer the heat, and then put my tinned wire tip onto that little blob and just touch it. It melts, fuses together, and there it's all done. Simple, simple. Okay, so now the soldering is done. But I like to use the iron for one more thing. So what we need to do next is that we have to get these long ends into this holder, and that can be a little bit tricky, and the ends tend to fray. So I like to put a tiny little bit of solder on these tips just to hold them together. So put it down again. Just a tiny little bit like this. Acts like a little bit of hair gel to hold this together. And let's turn off the soldering station, put it away, we don't need it again. And if these were to be a big blob, then you can just trim it off with your cutter, so it will easily go into the holder. So the next step is to insert these wires into the holders. So the short one goes at the bottom. Have to maybe bend it a little bit to get it over this little hump. Push it in all the way up to the insulation, and maybe a little bit further. You can even have a little bit of insulation sticking through if your wire is thin enough for that. And then bend it and put it through the hole so it comes out on the back. And just leave it like that for now. So the next step is to put the wire in the top part. This is maybe a little bit more tricky. Perhaps you want to start there. I typically start at the bottom. So this wire goes in, again, we want to maybe bend it a little bit, in through this hole, through the little channel that's at the bottom of the button here. Perhaps pull it up, make it a little bend, and then it needs to go in through this hole and all the way out. You may want to use another set of pliers. These are called needle nose pliers because they're really pointy. This is an ugly pair, but they're really, really useful. And don't worry if your wire doesn't come all the way out on the other side. That is fine. It doesn't have to. I just like it because it's easier to assemble it. So it just comes out like that. We will trim that back when we are done. So now the wires are in. Be careful. Be careful so you don't pull on them. It's easy to pull out. And we don't have many steps left, so we need battery cells. So these have a plus side, it says plus on them, and they have one side that says nothing, that is minus. The plus side has to be in contact with the wire that we wire to the plus terminal. And if you can't remember, if you can't see it anymore, you can look further down. Here it says plus, so we know the bottom wire is plus. So we put the bottom down, and then the other one has to go in the same direction, they're in series. And then the trickiest part here is that we need to kind of curl up this wire, the white wire. I like to maybe twist it, just to make one curl like that, so it nicely curls up, goes into this little rectangular cavity. Almost. One more attempt. See if we can get it into its correct place. I have to use my pliers to get it in the right place. And there it is. So you need a firm grip on this because the wires are a bit stiff. And so here's one important thing. Make sure these two wires don't touch, because that will short circuit your battery. So let's trim those off directly. And here you really want to wear your safety glasses because that may come flying. And before we put the screws in, let's make sure it works. A firm grip, and there it is. It works just fine. So let's put the screws in. So make sure you get the screwdriver that really fits the screws. If you get the wrong size screwdriver, it won't work well and you may damage the screws. So push down firmly, push on the screw, but be gentle with the torque. So just like 2 fingers, because it's very easy to strip out the threads. So we don't really have any real threads. We're just threading the screw into the plastics. And it's easy to damage it, and you don't want that because then it's going to fall apart and won't work. So just tighten it up until it's nice and snug, maybe a little bit further. The screws should be pretty much flush with the bottom. And there it is. There is our light holder. So we're almost done. There's one last step to get done. So these strips typically comes with an adhesive backing. So this is sticky. I don't terribly like this. It doesn't stick very well to the inside of the 3D printed handbag. So what I do, I just take off this backing paper and then I put foam mounting tape on the back instead. I use an automotive grade foam mounting tape. This one may be a little bit difficult to get hold of, but any foam mounting tape will be fine. So this one is a little bit wider than what I need, but that's okay because we can actually make multiple pieces out of one strip. So what I'm going to take first, I'm going to put this just edge, right in the edge, on the back of the strip. So there it is. And then cut it off. So this piece that's left over here, I'm not going to throw that away. I'm just going to cut this and then I'm going to save that and use it for the next handbag. So just cut it. Make sure you don't cut into the LED strip because that will damage it or may damage it. So there it is. This piece, I'm not throwing it away. I'm just putting it on top of my roll and then I will use it for the next handbag. So we're getting close to the last step here. So let's get the backing off from the foam tape. It's off. Let's take our bag and let's put it in. So it slides into this little holder, but you have to watch out because there is a little edge here. And so gently bend your strip. Be a little bit careful. It's easy to break the strip and you don't want to do that. push it in, push the holder in, and then just lay down the light strip below this little shelf, which actually is there so you won't get blinded by the LEDs. Push it down, and then let's see if it works. Oh boy, we have purple lights. Let's turn off the light so we can actually see it. Isn't that awesome? So this is called pink. I think it's more purple, but I think that's a lot of fun. So there it is. Your LED light is done, and it wasn't that hard, was it?